Salvador. Okay, was that the end of the answer? Yeah? Okay.
Can I read mine?
Sure. What's your name?
Valentina Kreisman.
Kreisman.
Valentina Kreisman.
Okay. Valentina. Go ahead.
Female speakers often tend to use standard variants more frequently than men because these forms carry overt speech.
Overt?
Overt.
Okay.
In other words, they are associated with education, correctness, and high social classes. In large cities, women may use standard variants
Okay.
to gain respectability and access to social and economic opportunities, since linguistic behavior can compensate for other social inequalities and allow them to negotiate status in societies where women have limited power.
Other. Remember to pronounce the word other.
Other.
Now, Valentina, how can you explain your own statement that the use of standard variants can compensate for material inequality? Social inequalities, like?
Because in some societies, women are, well, they are in a lower possibility,
Not lower possibility. See what you're trying to say.
yes,
Paulina.
that men sometimes have more power than women.
Okay, so
For
they are.
example,
So women are in a subordinate position.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so
Women, by using standard variants, can position themselves in a more equal position as men.
as in a
I
position
mean,
of
they can ask for more respect, maybe.
Okay, reactions. Reactions to that. That's Valentina is using in her argumentation one of the many explanations that have been given for why women tend to use standard variants more frequently than do men. How do you react to that? Or is the use of standard variants, or is the frequent use of standard variants a means to achieving social equality? Any reactions? Do you accept that?
I was just thinking, I'm not sure about social equality because like last class we talked about how men are very how are they saying that?
I didn't get what you said.
The last class we were talking about how men use standard variants less often.
Right.
So using more standard variants I don't think would achieve social equality.
Okay.
Or at least from that information it would correlate.
Okay. What do you think? You agree with that? Are you okay with that idea? You don't know.
Maybe they in that way gain prestige.
Okay, I see your point. So you're saying this is not about
I'm not sure if they achieve social equality.
making inequality disappear. That's not the issue.
Yes.
The issue is women from certain social classes may associate themselves as a group with the prestige associated with a higher class.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that the women from the lower middle classes become richer, and it doesn't mean that women as a group achieve equality with men, or they stop being subordinate to men.
Yes. That is my point.
Okay. Okay. So you see, that's a little bit more nuanced, more. That's an explanation that is less simplistic than saying just by using standard variance more frequently, there is less inequality between men and women, because in the inequality, the gender inequality that is palpable in Western societies between men and women cannot be simply erased or reduced by the use of more standard variance than men. And in fact, these tendencies that we can observe, and these differences that we can observe between men and women's speech, they have existed for many decades or centuries. And inequalities haven't disappeared. Even when women have been using standard variance more frequently than men do.
Can we talk about criticism? Because in my answer I wrote that women know that they are more subject to criticism than men.
Okay,
So they will try to use variants that have more overt prestige in order to claim that value.
in order to claim or to associate themselves with the prestige of the standard variance.
And not be
Okay.
grouped down.
Okay.
Careful with the women will try to, they just do. They just
Yeah.
use higher frequencies.
Yeah. Okay. So, Valentina,
Yes.
reconsider these other ideas. And don't just simply believe that by using more standard variance, women magically stop being subordinate to men. Okay?
Yes.
You can criticize the ideas that you get in that reading material too.
Okay.
Okay?
Sure. And I had another question.
Okay.
For example, in this question, are we supposed to refer to the different theories that are presented in the book, or just pick one?
Ah. You choose.
Okay.
Not all of them consider what women may gain or obtain by using standard variance more frequently than men do. And those are not theories, those are explanations. Okay?
Okay.
Theory is something different. A theory involves, it's a scientific theory involves a body of concepts, hypotheses, etc.
Okay.
So these are some explanations that some authors offer. But you could also think about other things that women may gain that probably were not considered in the reading materials, or in these reading materials, but somewhere else also. Okay. Any other volunteer? Is there anybody who'd like to read the answer to this question? No? Melissa? Melissa Lopez, okay. What about the other question? We have a doubt about what I dictated the question, as a question. Did I dictate non-standard variance?
Yes.
Non-standard variance. Okay, so what do men from large cities gain from using non-standard variance? Okay, that was the
Ay,
correct.
mira, eso no lo puedo contar nunca más nada.
No hice así.
Yeah, okay.
Hiciste literalmente eso.
Sí, yo sé que me
Can you give that question?
Eso yo
And
amo.
what's your name? Selene?
Sí.
Tomati? Selene.
In large cities, we use non-standard.
Please, read out loud.
Men in large cities would use non-standard variants, often gain solidarity and local identity within their peer or working class groups. It signals toughness, authenticity, and loyalty to their community, which can enhance social bonding and reputation in those networks.
Which name? So your answer started, men gain solidarity. It's not something that you gain. Men gain. How can we help Selene here? Yeah, definitely. Men signal solidarity with who?
Their peer or working class groups.
Okay, but some men are not working class. So, and still they use non-standard variants more frequently than women. So, they may be middle class men, and they use non-standard variants more frequently than middle class women. So,
So it signals solidarity with other men.
right.
Signals conversion.
Convergence with other men.
Other men.
Yeah.
Closeness or convergence with members of the group.
Okay, and what verb did you use before closeness and convergence?
I'm gonna read it all. Male speakers from large cities benefit from using non-standard variants more frequently than women do, as this shows divergence from other groups, women, and closeness or convergence with the members of the group, other men.
Very good answer. But we need to change something. We usually talk about convergence and divergence when we are talking about what happens in interaction. And in interaction, speakers accommodate to their interlocutors, to the audience, either in such a way that their speech is more similar to what they hypothesize the speech of their interlocutors. So in that case, there is convergence. And the opposite, making one speech less similar to the speech of the interlocutor, that's divergent. Okay. what you need here is a concept. The idea is a good idea. What you need is a concept that sociologists use to talk about relationships between groups. And this is a concept that you came across in the paper by Mendoza Denton about Latinas. Because Mendoza Denton describes a number of semiotic resources of different kinds. Gestures, colors, clothes, kinds of tattoos, numbers, drawings that are used, yes, those are, there are a number of discourse practices and social practices that gangs involved in, and they indicate what in relation to norteños and sureños, and in relation to Latinas and white Americans. They indicate
Separation.
Distinction.
distinction. So, men, what do men gain by doing this? By using more non-standard variants, or using non-standard variants more frequently than women do. They gain distinction from a group that they don't want to be associated with. And what do women gain by using more standard, or using standard variants more frequently than men? Can they indicate distinctions from men? Of course. Exactly. So on the one hand, men can indicate I'm like other men, and at the same time indicate I'm different from women. Solidarity was not a bad idea either. What came first, the standard variant or the vernacular variant? It's impossible to answer. Yeah. But this issue of being able to indicate distinction between social groups is not an explanation that is offered by the author you read, and that is pretty basic, because you could argue whether women are indeed more status conscious than men are, and you could challenge that and say, where do you get that idea from? Probably that works for a given society in which one researcher interviewed women and drew that conclusion from actual data, and the interpretation is coherent with what he or she observed. Okay? All right, that is good for one case, but that doesn't work for all cases. Last class, we talked about how well, now we talked about how women can resort to standard variants. As a means to accrue symbolic capital, some sort of capital that they cannot obtain otherwise. Okay, but what about societies that are more egalitarian and women are capable of accumulating material capital, but still they use more standard variants than men do? So some explanations, like we said, work for some cases, but not for all cases. What all of these cases seem to have in common, however, is, or what seems to be more basic, is the idea of distinction. And that occurs not just for the different groups that are categorized according to sex. You can consider social classes too, and you can consider age groups too. What do teenagers gain from using more innovative variants than adults do? Exactly. That's one of the many things that they can indicate. I'm not an adult. I reject all the ideas associated with mainstream, middle-class adulthood.
And also, belonging among
Exactly.
their own peers.
Exactly. So you see, it's the two things that can be indicated simultaneously. Solidarity and affiliation with a group of peers that are teenagers and that share a lot of values and attributes with me, and at the same time distinction from those that don't. And things become more complex when you look at different groups of teenagers, because there may be distinctions among themselves too. Maybe teenagers don't establish, early teenagers maybe don't establish distinction among themselves along social class lines the way adults do. Maybe they establish distinctions along a different parameter, like in one of the examples you read in the extra materials. What matters is who is tougher than whom. So a gang of very tough guys get together and they get involved in social practices and language practice, discursive practices that are different from other teenagers. So not only do they indicate I'm different from adults, there is distinction from adults, but also I'm different from other groups of teenagers too. That was studied in the 2000s, a couple of years before the 2000s, in a school in Detroit. So in a school, these researchers became close to groups, different gangs, just like Mendoza Denton did. And the groups that she worked with were the burnouts, those are the tough guys, and the jocks, the guys that follow all the school rules, participate in all school activities, never skip classes, they participate in choir in the school, and they stay home after school. The burnouts are the guys that get together downtown and they consume not just beer, but also weed. And they get together with older people and they listen to punk music and they play punk music and they were the rebels, so to speak, okay? And she discovered that their use of variants was slightly different in some specific cases, so their speech. Imagine, it's not only their speech that indicated distinction, it was also their clothes, it was also their musical taste, it was also all the other social practices that they got involved with. But speech was an index of, remember the concept of index? It was an index of group membership. Certain pronunciations were symbolically associated with being a burnout. And guess who were the most badass burnouts? A group of
The ones who use the most
yeah,
non-standard.
exactly. And those who used the word fuck all the time. And who were those? The female burnouts. Tougher than the male burnouts. So they were even more non-standard than probably they had more than the male burnouts. Yeah. Okay. Next question. Any other comments about gender or sex? Remember what we said last class about sex and gender. We do admit that these are different concepts altogether. But most studies take into consideration sex as an independent variable. This woman, Penelope Eckert, who studied the burns and the burnouts and the job, she did consider gender, not just sex. And she was able to carry out long interviews with each of the research subjects, and she concentrated on gender roles and expectations associated with each gender. That's why she was able to use the concept of gender in the way that most social sciences do. For example, the burnout, the female burnout, dressed in a way that was the opposite of what is expected from middle class women. Dark, baggy trousers full of holes, spikes or bracelets with spikes, and skulls in the necklace. Okay, so that is to do with gender, not simply, okay, you're a woman, you fall into this category, you're a man, you fall into this other category. That leads to a discussion of communities of practice. I think we mentioned this last Monday. The jobs and the burnout are two communities of practice. Just as norteñas and sureñas are two communities of practice. And what defines a community of practice is what the people in that community share, which is social practices and spiritual practice. And you said that some are bigger than others, and some of them can be short-lived, so they exist for one particular purpose. For example, let's organize, let's collect some goods for a Christmas for children that are in hospital. Okay, so you form a group, you participate in that group that is short-lived, so that's a community practice. When your task is done, the community practice, or it gets transformed into something else. Okay? And some other communities of practice live longer. What's the difference between a community of practice? We need to talk about. There was a question for you about social networks. So let's do that first. Castini, opina. Candela, Candela. Okay.
The question was, how can social networks influence speech? Social networks can influence speech by shaping the linguistic patterns individuals adopt based on their interactions within specific community groups. When people we interact with belong to a homogeneous group, we tend to speak the way the rest of the group does to indicate their affiliation and values. And by using particular vocabulary, speakers emphasize different aspects of their social identity.
Okay, let's go back to some of the ideas. So the very first thing is, and it's actually presupposed by the question. Social networks do influence the speech of individuals. Okay, and it's a good thing that you talked about the individual speaker, because as Dr. Caras explained last class, a social network, when we talk about social networks in social linguistics, the variation in social linguistics, we talk about one single individual's social network. Then there is something that you might want to reconsider in your answer. You said, you talked about homogeneity. Can you repeat that?
Yes. When people we interact with belong to a homogeneous group, we tend to speak the way the rest of the group does to indicate affiliations and values.
So, if the group is homogeneous, that means that all of them speak in the same way. What do you think of your idea?
That we are, we all speak the same.
Do we?
No,
So?
the group is not homogeneous.
Exactly. Groups are not homogeneous. The speech of groups is not homogeneous. Why not? Valentina, right? No. Candela, or not? Why isn't the speech of a social group homogeneous?
I don't know, because we belong to different groups, and I mean, we interact. Now I don't understand.
Okay, that's a question to the class. Why isn't the speech of social groups homogeneous? That's an exam question.
Because we as speakers and also as members of socials, we vary the way we speak, we alternate between different parents, and that's why it's not homogeneous.
Everybody has a different speech. Every media has different speech from others.
What do you mean a different speech? You mean a different dialect? Individuals use variance of variables in different or at different frequencies. And why is that?
Because they may signal different. I'm not gonna say what. They may signal different social needs with different groups.
Okay, that's the effect. Oh, let's see.
Because social networks are not the only thing that influence speech.
Uh-huh.
So we can say that we only accommodate our speech to our social network, so it becomes homogeneous.
You
But there are
accommodate
other
you accommodate your speech to your interlocutor in interaction, not to the social network.
Okay. So in
But you were on the right
our-
track. Let's
Our
see.
interlocutors from a specific social network.
I thought you were going to talk about something else.
Yes,
But when you said
I
speech
want
is influenced not just by social networks, but by
audience.
okay, the audience and
The patterns of interaction.
I have an idea of that, and I have a question.
okay.
Our audience, our context of
Social factors,
Like
class, gender, age.
to begin with, and the list goes on and on and on. So
Okay, finish with that idea, and then we need to make the comments.
yeah, so any social group you consider, Candela, for example, the social group women, the speech of that social group is not homogeneous, and the group itself is not homogeneous, because in the group you find teenage women, adult women, older or elderly women. You consider, you can find lower working class women, lower middle class women, middle class women, upper middle class women. And it's not the groups, not just the group itself that is heterogeneous, but their speech too, because it's, what's your name? Agustina Piñero said the speech of women is simultaneously influenced by their age, by the social factor, social class, occupation, years of education. What else? There was a long list on the board.
Place of residence.
Place of residence, place of origin. Right. Okay, so Dr. Galina, then Lucy, and then Thomas.
Just a comment. Here, Clase, what's her name? Magdalena noticed that Ronnie Candela was led by Holmes into the trap. We talked that writers sometimes take licenses. And in Meyerhoff, it takes, Holmes, 197, you find that when people we mix with regularly belong to a homogeneous group. So correct that, right? This was a license.
Probably.
Notice that lesson 1 on social linguistics, it started with a very, very widely accepted social linguistic fact that is the speech of social groups is heterogeneous, right? So we can challenge
And
that. So, you can go back to the reading material and just, circle
What page again?
197.
197, last page.
All of the heterogeneous.
So maybe this is to do with one social grouping not being strictly homogeneous, but sharing many social characteristics, like belonging to the same social class, being of a similar age, living in the same neighborhood, in the same city,
Right, but
doing similar jobs.
activities.
Okay, so homogeneity is not strict.
But you can tell that in the social network that is described there, we have an uncle that seems to be older
Right.
than the owner of the network. And then we have Joe, who seems to be a female speaker, who belongs to a different gender group. So even though there are some shared social characteristics, the group is not homogeneous, right? It's nearly.
Right.
So can I say that it may seem homogeneous because when I'm with my friends from the School of Languages, in the group we talk in a certain way. But then when I'm talking with other people, like people in my family or my colleagues at work, we get our speech all the time with the group that we're in. So it may seem homogeneous in that moment that we're all talking kind of in the same way, in a similar way, but we're always continuing to be different groups.
But you know, think about, do they belong to, I mean, to all the people you interact with at this school work only in Cordoba? Because you all share the place of birth. Maybe you share some features, like I said, that you belong to a certain age group, you share some interests. But I would doubt that the group is totally homogeneous.
I'm thinking of, as a general rule, can we think, I love general rule. Can we think of the idea that the more involved that an individual is with a certain group, or the more capacities that a person shares with their members, there is more assimilation in their speech style or variants that they choose. Let's say the way they speech style correct. Isn't that a correlation that we can?
Yes.
Okay.
It's it's not that the speaker shares capacities with the other members of the group. The individual interacts with other members of the social network in different capacities. Capacities mean roles. As a business partner, as a family member, as a friend. Yeah, Valentina.
Yes. I wrote something else in this
Okay.
question.
I think we are done with Candela's answer. Now, Candela considered one kind of social network in her answer, the same as Thomas. So, Valentina.
Yes. Social networks shape the way people speak because they determine the intensity.
No. Condition.
Condition.
They don't determine it.
Yes. The intensity and type of contact we have with others.
Okay.
In dense networks, such as tight peer groups, speakers tend to maintain
Maintain.
vernacular forms, since language reinforces solidarity and identity within the group. In looser networks, such as in large urban areas, speakers are exposed to more linguistic varieties, which sometimes leads to greater use of standard forms.
Okay, that last part is sort of an overgeneralization,
Okay.
maybe. But I recommend the terms high density network and low density network.
Okay.
to describe it.
I have a comment because can you read the first part again?
Yes. Social networks shape the way people speak because they influence the intensity and type of contact we have with others.
Okay, let's stop there. It's not true that social networks influence or condition the type of interaction that people have with other people. The social network captures those interactions.
And what is it? What the kind of interaction and the intensity of interaction, the patterns of interaction influence speech.
It's not true that.
Sí, lo pusiste otra vez.
Sí.
Okay.
Is it necessary to do that description before? Because I did it like short
What do
because
you
of
mean?
the answer.
Okay.
Okay,
We
on the
have your
question.
answer.
I wrote the denser the social
What's your
network.
name?
Mine, Sofia Livovich.
Sophie. Okay.
The denser the social network, the lower the proportion of standard forms. The looser the social network, the higher the proportion of standard forms. Very short.
That's an oversimplification
Okay.
because there may be highly dense networks. Imagine very rich people that live in gated communities, what we call los countries, and they tend to have dinner parties among themselves. They play golf or rugby or tennis among themselves. They do businesses among themselves. They are very unlikely to use vernacular variants more frequently. So the concept of social network does help explain variation, but it doesn't have a direct link with either standard or vernacular variants, depending on whether it's highly dense or not highly dense. Low dense, no. A low density network, okay? Don't establish direct connections between high density and vernacular or low density and standard. Because there are cases in which things don't work really like that. Because if a low density social network involves interacting with lots of different diverse people that don't know one another, that's why the network is a low density network. But they all belong to the working classes. Chances are the variants that are preferred will be vernacular rather than standard. Okay?
So, we don't have to answer this in an exam. How can social networking for speech, we can say that influence speech to a certain extent, but there are other factors that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, this is one of the many factors that influence. You can add it to the list of all the factors we've been considering, including linguistic factors, contextual factors, social demographic factors. Just a second. Michael, I don't know if you'd like to make any other comment about social networks.
I think this is it. I mean, are there any other questions? This is your time. This is your time to read your answers aloud so you get feedback from both of us. Yeah.
What is that?
The dialect of the individual. So each one of us speaks an dialect. And do you know what's a dialect? Do you know any other word for dialect? Variety. Okay. Variety. And dialect is seldom used in linguistics because it carries very negative connotations. But it's a variety. And what's a variety? What's a variety? Huh? No, a form, in your reading materials, authors use the term form to mean a variant of a variable. If you can use variant, that's more precise. And you forget about
A variety is a system of
exactly.
variables. A system of usually variants.
It includes more than variant. A variety is a linguistic system with its vocabulary, its morphology, its syntax, its phonology.
That's why all varieties are grammatical because they are systematic.
Exactly. And varieties exhibit certain characteristics at all levels: the lexical, the morphological, the grammatical level, that are associated with certain geographical areas or social groups. That's why we talk about, for example, Peninsular Spanish, Argentinian Spanish, those are different varieties, or dialects if you want. And we talk about African American Vernacular English, which is a variety of English, but it's not associated with a geographical area. It's not the English of Africa. It's the English of a particular social group.
When we think of a variety as a variant of a language variable, the same structure of variable and their variant, right? Think of the variable as the language standard or normative form, and then the different dialects as their possible variants depending on the region.
No, that's a, okay, I understand where the question comes from, but we're gonna think about it a little bit more in Unit 5. There is a belief, a common belief among lay people that the standard variety of a language is the language, which is not the case, because the standard variety doesn't have any intrinsic linguistic merit to be above all the other language varieties. All of them are, in linguistic terms, all of them are equal. In social terms, and in political terms, we know that the standard variety is in a superordinate position in relation to the others. And what people usually call a language, what they mean is the standard variety. So British English is not the language. It's one of the many dialects.
So the extension, right? I read that in one of the papers, that the extension between the variants that I use in order to signal membership to a group, and also what I want to signal as being different from every other speaker. Right?
Yeah, that's what we discussed previously. Definitely. So there is a tension between these two motivations. The motivation to indicate that you fit in or you belong to a group and you're affiliated with a group, and the other motivation to indicate that you're different from, disaffiliate, or there's some sort of distinction with another group. Ahora lo estás haciendo muy particular. This is, because think about, okay, let me finish your idea.
I use standard variants in order to show more of that, right? In order to show that that has to do with concept. But I also want to differentiate myself from other candidates.
No lo he escuchado los otros candidatos. Before the question I was going to ask you about social networks. Is there any question about social networks? Think about not just the relationship that are established between the individual that is the center of the social network and other members of the social network. How frequently and habitually they interact with one another, and in what roles they do so. Consider also the fact that some social networks they may be highly dense, but they may be geographically extended. Such a highly dense social network may have an effect on somebody's speech that is different from another social network that is highly dense, but that is locally established. For example, established in one single neighborhood, like all the cases that you have in the reading materials. The social network of working class men that were based around the same neighborhood. They worked in the neighborhood, they had leisure activities in the same neighborhood, all their family lived in the same neighborhood. So, chances are the local vernacular variants are going to be used much more frequently by such men, right? But if a social network is geographically extended, interlocutors can come into contact with variants of a variable that are used at different frequencies in other places. So, as Valentina over there on the back said, that may lead to a higher frequency of use of vernacular variants. I thought you putting your hand up. Okay. So my next question was, what's the difference between the conceptual difference, not your anecdotes, but the conceptual difference between the concept social network and the concept community of practice? Bueno, ven escribiendo, pueden responder. What about you?
Sofía March.
Marchi?
March.
Ah, March. Sophia. Okay, Sophia.
What was the question?
What's the difference between community of practice and the concept community of practice and the concept social network?
It's probably that you may belong to a community of practice, but you don't interact with the members of that community every single day. It's not your social network.
But por ejemplo, diciendo, think about the conceptual differences, not the anecdotal differences. Un tipo muy excepcional que no tiene una red social, pero sí tiene una comunidad. Concept.
A social network is based on interaction. And
Whose interaction?
speakers that are of one speaker with their network. I don't know.
The other speakers that are part of his or her network.
Right. So
Okay.
community of practice has to do with social practices, membership to the group, and practices that signal membership to the group.
Okay. More ideas? Okay. That's conceptual thinking, okay? No buscar el caso raro.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other ideas? Okay.
Social network, both are like groups that share something, but social network.
Both are? Okay, so he started by noticing the similarities between the two concepts. Both are
Small groups.
groupings, agrupamientos,
Yeah.
groupings.
But the focus in social networks put on the relation with an individual member and with community practice with a trait that this group shares, such as a geographic or something like that. Like I think of like
No.
a small village that is community practice.
No. A small village is not a community of practice unless all the members of the small village share their participation in the same practices.
For example, a festival that they arrange.
Well, in that case, it wouldn't be the entire village. It would be a grouping within or among the villages that form the festival committee, and that is community. So the community of practice is not defined by any social characteristic. It's defined by
The participation in an activity.
exactly the habitual, recurrent participation in some activity, in some sort of enterprise, with some goal that sort of pulls all the members of that community together.
So at the center of the social network, there's an individual,
Right.
and at the center of a community of practice, there's an activity.
Okay, you could put it like that.
So, can we say that, the difference is that in a social network, there's interaction, there's everyday interaction with people from different activities and different walks of life, and you're always interacting with different people whereas in a community of practice, you're interacting with people that are engaging in a specific activity, or they're getting together for a specific purpose.
Exactly. Yes. Okay, so you see, these are two different ways of grouping people to study how the grouping can influence the speech of somebody. Or in the case of a community of practice, social linguists study the grammatical or lexical or phonological features of the grouping itself. The grouping called community of practice. The community of practice, not English. And the community of practice, Slovenian or whatever. Okay? So, another difference is that the concept of social network enables the researcher to study the speech of an individual, whereas the concept of community of practice aims at describing the speech characteristics of this small grouping, not of one single individual.
In the social practice, you may see different community practices. Community practice, I don't know how to theorize it. Community practice. Like you study an individual member and for different members and people with which that person interacts, you may see different groups, like social groups, so therefore community of practice, communities of practice, or not.
Yeah, one individual can have can participate in many different communities of practice. You do.
Yeah.
But if a researcher is interested in one individual, what they use typically is the concept of social network rather than community.
So within a community of practice, each individual has their own social network.
Yeah. Pero los conceptos, por lo general, en un estudio no se combinan. Un investigador usa un concepto con ciertos fines, otro concepto con otros fines.
And both of these influence speech in a different way. I mean, social networks and practice.
That's an interesting question that you should be able to answer by now.
If both concepts can explain how speech is influenced in different ways.
They interact with other factors. They intersect.
Okay. But what is what's the key concept in social networks? What is represented by those lines that Dr. Galina drew on the board last week?
The capacity. The capacity.
No. She insisted on that term. I insisted on that term. Interaction. So, the concept of social network captures interactional patterns. Patrones de interacción habitual entre el individuo y otro. So, that's what seems to be the focus there is how interacting with different people, interacting habitually with different people can shape the speech of an individual. The concept of community of practice, on the other hand, considers how speech characteristics both signals belonging to a particular community of practice, and it can also shape or construct a community of practice identity. So certain phonological features in the speech of Norteña doesn't simply indicate this is a Norteña and belongs to a Norteña gang. But using those features also constructs the Norteña identity. Okay? So it's not really two different concepts that you can think about in terms of one belongs to the other or one is inside the other. These are concepts that belong to different research traditions. They are oriented to different goals. They can reveal different things.
I have a question. Because we...
What's your name again?
Valentina Claria.
Claria, okay, Valentina.
Because the idea of social network is related to interaction, would it be fair then to say that audience design is more related to social networks because of these interactions?
The thing is, researchers that do their analysis using the social network concept, they are not interested in the moment by moment dynamic of interaction as we did when we applied the concept of audience design and analyzed the two video messages. Okay? That sort of moment-to-moment calibration is out of the picture. Okay, time for a break. And then we do the linguistic marker.
Nah.
Where you find this diagram? Page 45 in Meyerhoff's chapter.
Mate.
Not that one.
Hold on.
45, I think.
45. Mate.
45.
Diagram. A mí me preguntan.
Sí lo vas a ver en el diagram, déjate de...
Está bien, amiga, discúlpame, no te quería ofender.
Esto ya lo vimos.
¿Esto? Sí, es amiga. Pero es mínimo, ya se escribe. Ay, amiga. ¿Y hay qué? Droga. Que de regal quiero un auto. Ay, amiga.
¿Cuál querés?
Al 2008. Va tan fluido. Tenía 4 horas ya.
Have you found the diagram?
Sí.
Okay, so we have two parts to the diagram. There is range of variation between speakers from different social groups and range of variation in an individual speaker. So, do you understand the diagram? No. Yes? You do? No?
Ah, mentira.
Who said yes? No? That is showing you that there is comparing the gap that exists between two social groups can see in the speech of an individual. This is showing you that one individual varies or fluctuates between two variants less than two social groups. So the gap that exists between men and women, for example, is bigger than the variation that one individual exhibits when she style shifts.
And then, after the graph, we could add another graph on top, consider the linguistic factors.
Excellent. So these two boxes or whatever one large on top, one smaller below. These two are graphically representing the effect that contextual factors have on the speech of an individual. That's why you get here intra-speaker variation. And on top of this, you get this represents the strength of the effect or the strength of social factors like sex, social class, etc. So this represents the range of variation between different social groups. For example, teenagers versus adults, or the working class versus middle classes. So which kind of factor has a stronger influence on the speech? Social factor. And what Julieta is saying, we could still add something else, some other part of the diagram to represent the strength of the linguistic factors, which are always stronger. Okay? So this is the same kind of information that you get in those little formulas with the they're going the other way around. So linguistic factors are stronger than social factors, and they're stronger than you can add audience, topic, speech activity. Okay.
Can we just say audience design or something?
The thing is, audience design is the speech behavior as influenced by this. Okay. Do you have any question about that page, the following page, or the diagram?
I have a question.
Okay.
The paper goes, Bruno Calawi. Bruno Calawi.
Calapuch.
Okay. The paper goes on saying that, according to other researchers, depending on the linguistic factor and if the variance has information semantic load, variation between individuals could be greater than those variation in social groups. So it would not always be the case that follows the same kind of order that we saw on the board.
Let's say the ranking of factors according to how strong they are or how strongly they influence a variable always has linguistic factors on top. Grammar is king
Yes.
or queen, whatever you. It's always on top. And then, as you said, some research has shown that contextual factors sometimes can be stronger than social factors.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what research shows. So, social factors and contextual factors, as you said, depending on the variable, they can be in a
Switch places.
in
In the ranking.
reverse order. From what I've read, the effect of the audience has been shown to be stronger than social factors on very exceptional cases. What seems to be the normal case is that social factors have a stronger influence than contextual factors such as the audience. That exceptional case was the case of one African American male speaker that, when interacting with his grandmother, almost used African American vernacular English features almost categorically. So he totally attuned to his grandmother's speech. So in the overall statistics, the effect of his attuning to his grandmother's speech was stronger than his being middle class, his being of a certain age, etc., etc. But that was like I said, exceptional.
Okay.
The Meyerhoff mentioned some other case as well, but
Yes,
it seems to be the rule is social factors are stronger than.
Okay, so maybe on page 200 from the same paper that we discussed previously, I had a question because in that sense, I think that it is Holmes. 200 says the social class, background, gender, age, and all whatever. But the writing influence which is taking place in a contextual.
The overriding influence.
Social interaction. So I think that the contextual factors more relevant
Okay.
than the other social factors.
Okay.
So you're saying kind of opposite. Then be relevant in the statistics and cases.
No, it's not irrelevant. It does have an influence. Well, but here she's talking about some of the cases that show that interaction has a greater influence than gender, age, and ethnicity. Okay. Okay. So this is an area in social linguistics in which research makes progress constantly, and the more recent studies have sort of abandoned, by recent I mean from the 2000s onwards, most social linguists seem to be concentrating on social networks and communities of practice. So probably their newer findings prove that that order that I just wrote on the board is not that accurate. Okay? So we need to make room for these. It's not that they are inconsistencies, it's that the findings are refining the general theory. And what we do know for sure is that linguistic factors are the strongest in every case. Okay, but that's good. Good alert reading of the materials. Okay.
social use of standard forms. Age. That's right. And he said, how come? Right? They asked this question. How come that in this sample, right, as speakers get to their 20s, they show an increase in the frequency of use of standard forms. And then, as they get older, there is a retreat from this frequency. How can we explain that? And in order to come up with a plausible explanation, they took Bourdieu's concept of the linguistic market. David Sankoff and Susan Labarche prepare an index for, we are not going to consider that index, but an index in which they say, okay, we can measure speakers, let's see, how much speakers need to use certain linguistic forms, particularly standard forms. Because there are some speakers, right, that have, quote unquote, a higher need to use standard forms. And they calculate that index by taking into account multiple social factors. One of those factors was occupation. One. And they come up with this idea that as many young speakers get involved in the labor market and as they aspire to occupations or jobs in which they have to interact with people and they need to show that they can interact with other white-collar employees in the way they do, they seem to be more pressured to use higher frequencies of time. And they say that pressure that this age group who's entering the workforce has is shown in the proportions of use of standard forms in their speech. There is a system of gatekeeping, right? In order to engage in a particular occupation, you need to go through gatekeeping processes. So you need to go through interviews, and it seems that it is at those particular moments in which work candidates exhibit higher frequencies of standard form. It seems that once you are there, probably the need is not that higher. Yeah.
Consider that this graph is just a hypothetical situation. This is not actual findings. So probably when you consider a job like you did, we wouldn't observe any drop in the use of standard variants. You see it?
I was thinking that also when you're new at a workplace, you need to get used to the way in which they work and so you exhibit more frequent use of standard variant, but once that you're used to it or you have certain intimacy, let's say, with your workmates, you tend to relax and not change drastically your variety, but your variance, but you also tend to exceed less frequent. It's my hypothesis.
And Lucia, what kind of job do you have in mind? Would you say that all jobs rank differently in a list of jobs that require more or less the use of standard variants?
No, but I was thinking like Naya mentioned, like a teacher, let's say. When you are with your workmates, at the very beginning, you may treat like your mates like more respectfully, or you can have a more distant relation. But when you are you have been in that work for time, you tend to like, I don't know, use forms like che or something like that exhibit less standard.
I see your point that in interactions with intimates, speakers tend to increase the frequencies of use of vernacular forms. However, careful with the connection between, being polite and increasing the use of standard forms. Probably, we can associate this concept with what we thought about these needs to identify with a particular group. In the book, you have the example of, a candidate that aspires to get a job as a banker. And as he aspires to be a banker, his speech is likely to exhibit frequencies of use of standard variants that are similar to those of the social group he aspires to belong to.
Lucia,
Yes.
let's do something. Let's make a list of some jobs and occupations and try to think about which are the ones that require or demand or those in which it is expected that the people that do those jobs use higher frequencies of standard variants, not while interacting with their classmates, having a coffee in the break, but in doing the job, in carrying out the activities that are part of the job description. For example, if you're a teacher, while you're teaching, or while you're writing reports for parents. So let's try among the whole class to come up with some sort of ranking. What would you propose to be those jobs that are on top?
Office jobs. Office jobs.
Like? There are some office jobs that involve sitting on a computer, clicking on a screen, buying and selling stock markets, and there is interaction with the screen rather than with other human beings as part of the job.
But also processing data.
Data processing.
Entry,
Right.
analysis.
I'd
You-
say anything that's like consumer facing. So customer service, salesmen, someone said secretaries. So that's sort of when you're interacting with someone outside of your workplace and your occupation.
Okay.
That can also include like doctors, teachers.
Okay. How about last year my vacuum cleaner broke down and I had to take it to a technician's shop. And the guy just said 2 words to me, like, what happened? And then he handed back a piece of paper with the date and said, call me this day, on this day. Or call me then. And then he went back to his dirty workshop where he works alone. How much do you think he's expected to use standard variants in the doing of his activity? Not much. He doesn't even talk at all.
Unless he speaks with vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. By judging from the result that I got, probably he talks to vacuum and other stuff. What about a janitor? A school janitor. El portero o el ordenanza. At a school. Not the building of I'm sorry, the janitor of a building downtown, but school janitor who as part of his job talks to well, we don't have physical mailing now, but that there used to be a thing that was called mail, and a post officer. So they would bring stuff, and the janitor would get it and sign paper, and then walk to an office and deliver it, and then talk to students as part of the job, not just as chit-chatting. Talk to teachers. Some of them in schools, they open the door and receive and salute small kids when they come in every morning. So, what's your guess? Does a school janitor, or is a school janitor expected to use high frequencies of standard variance, or not?
Definitely the expectation is bigger for the school janitor than for the person who fixed your vacuum cleaner.
Absolutely. Why do you think so?
Because of the people with whom he's interacting, the audience.
Right. Right.
And the amount of interaction.
Right.
Right,
He's
what
almost.
is required from that employee, right? What are the job requirements? Interacting with kids, maybe with other teachers, with parents.
Can it also be related to the fact that he's in a way representing
Exactly.
the institution?
Exactly.
So a technician's only representing himself and his
Exactly.
craft.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, the importance that language has on the job that you do can be linked to the amount of standard variance that you are expected to use. For example, when you said the technician, well, language was not that important.
Exactly.
Right, exactly, the point is that for that particular employee, let's say, the technician, right? Let's say the use of standard form was not as much valued than for the school janitor. Right? So we need to think about how standard forms has symbolic value for certain professions, occupations, activities.
So it's not it's not. This is a different way of thinking about occupation. This is not occupation per se that has an influence on your job. This is the expectations surrounding the use of language involved in occupations. It's those expectations, those requirements that have an influence on speech. You could think about two different people with the same occupation, but performing those different occupations under different circumstances. Like, we usually give the example of the car mechanic. The car mechanic that works for himself at home and just, talks to his clients and sometimes just chit-chats with them, and that's it. Whereas there are some other car mechanics that work for larger firms, like the car dealer itself, so he needs to talk to and write reports addressed to insurance companies or reports that are sent to the car factory itself. They need to report on a malfunctioning part, and they also write emails to their bosses, their superiors in the car dealer company. So the requirements and the expectations on this second guy are different, totally different from the first guy who just works for himself and doesn't deal with insurance companies, etc., etc. So even though they do the same job, their use of language can be influenced by the fact that each one has to face different demands on language use.
And politeness is expected in every job, let's say, but you can be polite using vernacular variants. So
Absolutely.
there's a connection between politeness and standard variant. Right?
I was thinking about, an Airbnb host. And a manager at a local hotel in Palermo. And of course, the expectations are different because working as partner, quote unquote, of a large company requires some, some communication skills that are not required when you run your own small business in a local town with regular clientele that go there because they have been there last year and they want to go back to the same place because, I don't know, the hotel owner was very friendly and served homemade bread. When you book something online, interaction with the host is an important part of the decision of the client about closing the deal or saying, I will cancel this. No.
On the school janitor one, it's not the same if you're talking about a small rural school janitor or a very high-end private school.
Exactly.
We know that school janitor can be fired for using certain kind of language at school. A technician, exactly. A technician owning their own local business is not likely to be fired by using swearing words.
So Magdalena is talking about the different geographical locations of the job, same job, right? In a city or in a rural area.
And also probably the socio-economic class, the
Absolutely.
janitor is interacting with.
Exactly. So a top-tier private school versus a public school in a working-class neighborhood. Both may have janitors, but they're...
And they may do similar activities, but the interactions are not the same.
Exactly.
But an important, again, concept to remember is the concept of symbolic value. Symbolic value is value that is attached to the use of standard forms in some domains of activities, but not because of an inherent property of the form. It's rather a value that derives from social evaluation. When we look at Unit 5, we are going to go back to this chart and look at it to see how it shows a case of variation and not change. So far we haven't talked about language change, so I'm going to leave that. But what you see here is variation, mainly, on the basis of age. But you can see how age
un buen trabajo cubriendo la playa.
Power, moreover, because they have power by virtue
Total. La buena pizza servida bien.
¿Qué?
Servida bien.
¿Dónde me lo pongo?
Vamos, vamos.
Talk he offered at a conference in Buenos Aires several years ago, 2018. And it's being translated because the attendees to the conference, not all of them spoke English. He lectured in English, and this PowerPoint was sort of visual support in Spanish for those who don't understand English. It's in Moodle for you, okay? And it has examples, that concrete cases that you don't get in the paper. But the topic is the same, and this is both easy to understand and follow, but at the same time, it touches on something crucial that back then in 2018 was a big issue, and now in 2023 is an even bigger issue in many countries. 2025. What did I say? I wish it was 2023.
No, sto
What a Monday.
Carita extraña.
So, this is an acronym, and the way you say it in English is NATO. That's how Peter Patrick pronounces it. Language analysis, linguistic analysis for the determination of origin. So this is basically someone like the hundreds and or thousands of people that are going to Europe, escaping difficult situations in their countries, in Africa, in the Middle East. They go to Europe and they show up at a police station and they file a petition for asylum, claiming that they fear for their lives. So there is an official, an interpreter that register their reply, and they ask a few questions like, where do you come from? And among other things, what language do you speak? Then, that is the first interview, that is called the screening interview. Then after that, two things may happen. Either there is an in-depth interview with some official from migration, and they get more and more information about this asylum seeker. They get information about their life trajectory, how they traveled from their country to Europe, etc., etc. They ask for information about their family, if they have parents, if their parents are alive, if they have brothers or sisters, etc., etc. Or, before that interview, they may do the LADO interview. The LADO interview, that is, it can occur before or after the in-depth interview. And the LADO interview consists in usually a phone call. The asylum seeker is summoned to an office And in the same office, there is an immigration official, the asylum seeker, and usually an interpreter. And somebody else, usually from a private company, those private companies that Patrick mentions, like Spatula or Verify, those are private companies, private firms that provide the service of carrying out the analysis, and they sell the service to the countries. So it's like an outsourced thing, right? So the representative of the firm carries out the LADO interview with the asylum seeker. And the interview simply consists in obtaining speech from the asylum seeker. They record it, and that's the end of the LADO interview. Then the firm, for example, Verify, or whatever firm is hired, they use the recorded speech, they analyze it, and they produce a report. And they hand in the report to the government. And it's the government, the migration officials, that decide on the case. And say, okay, this asylum seeker is granted permission to stay or is kicked out. Now, why would they carry out linguistic analysis on the speech of a person looking for asylum? Because asylum seekers have no documents usually. They have no passport usually. They are escaping wars or famine usually. So they claim to be from a given country, and the European governments want to make sure that they are giving asylum to someone who comes from the country they claim to be. So what's their best guess? Well, if they speak this language, then they come from this other language. And that is what Peter Patrick challenges. Because, as you know, after studying the whole of Unit 4, your speech does not directly connect with your place of origin. There are hundreds and hundreds of factors that can influence the way you speak. And imagine being an asylum seeker in a country that is totally new to you. You're told you're going to have a phone interview with some stranger who doesn't live in the same country, and that the result of that interview will decide your fate. Think about the influence of topics, the influence of your audience or your interlocutor. Think about the effect of the task you're carrying out, the speech event. Are you likely or unlikely to accommodate to your interlocutor? If those are the pressure, very likely. So, in the PowerPoint presentation, you don't have time for it, but you can see it for yourself. He talks about the case of a guy who spoke Arabic. But in the interview, he accommodates to the variety of Arabic of his interlocutor, but and doesn't display features of the Arabic that he claimed he spoke originally. So instead of displaying features of Syrian Arabic, he attunes to his interlocutor, and what happens? Then they say, well, this guy doesn't come from the place where he says he comes. Asylum. The problem that Peter Patrick is pointing out is that there are very serious decisions about the life of human beings that are made by people that have no training. Because the problem is, the interview is carried out by a native speaker of that language, but a native speaker that is not a linguist. And the analysis is carried out by someone who is not an expert. So they don't take into consideration speech accommodation, they don't take into consideration the history of the speaker. For example, this guy in particular, this asylum seeker, was born in Syria, but moved to Egypt at a very young age. All his family died, and he was left alone in Egypt. So guess what happened to his dialect? Right. His dialect, his native dialect, got lost, or he lost many features of his original dialect. That is called language attrition. And the non-experts that analyzed his case don't know anything about language attrition. And that is something that can happen to any speaker of a language that moves from one place to the other. So these guys don't know not even 1% of what you've studied in this year. And in their hands is the life of a human being. So in the paper that you have in the reading materials, Peter Patrick tells you of all the changes and improvements that there have been. Some of them are not enough to improve the situation of asylum seekers and the application of these tests. But it's linguists that are trying to do what they can to help decision makers make fair decisions, right? The PowerPoint in Moodle, like I said, you can see, for example, in the PowerPoint, some of the forms, the formulario, that are used, and there are some comments. Some of the comments, part of the interview, and the comments by the author, so you may want to take a look at them. The post on Moodle recommends reading some slides that are the most important ones that can help you, that complement your reading materials. But it's a good idea to read the whole thing, because it's like reading in Spanish, the most important part of your version in English, all right? This paper is at the end of Unit 4 because it shows you one possible application of variation in social linguistics and how knowledge in variation in social linguistics can have a social impact or a political impact or a judicial impact. And it connects well with the topics in Unit 5. In Unit 5, after we deal with language change, we're going to talk about language policies. So this is a manifestation of some language policies of some countries that have made the decision to subject some category of people to linguistic screening. And they use language as a proxy to make decisions. Did you read it? Yep.
Yes.
It's long, but it's interesting.
Interesting.
I think that the PowerPoint will throw some light on, it gives you the the actual exam. So next time we meet, guys, we're gonna start the unit 5. And we're gonna devote next Monday to language change, which is a very important topic in unit 5. And I was going to say that the following Monday, next Monday, Monday the 15th is students. Then Monday the 22nd, there is a final exam, so I don't think we're going to meet. If we are having classes, we're going to let you know what I need.
Do you know the date for the sunset?
Not yet. No. So let me give you some homework for next month.
Thì obvio que saben. La regla principal es que no te cogen fecha. Vale, hijo.
Number 1.
Eso también vale. Vale, hijo.
Does the phonology of your mother tongue change over time? This is a yes/no question. So right after that, you write justify your answer. That's the most important part. And then question 2. Number 2. Can a person's variety, what do you call a person's variety? Can a person's variety be modified in the course of their lives? Justify your answer. Okay. We call it a day.
Se me pasa con esto.
Remember to bring your snap test so that they write grade.
No, no pasa, o sea, para que pasan 10 minutos.
Che,
¿Qué pasa, guacha?
entonces ¿qué paso le da para que me pase?
¿Qué?
Les aclaré que era un ejemplo, material extra no es estudio nuestro. ¿Y la foto?
También. Qué genial la foto. No, hace que mes y no lo... Hace que y no la soporto. Una, la otra. ¿Quién es? Ah, tampoco. Y encima no abre la boca cuando habla.
¿Tampoco le soporta?
Sí, no lo soporto. Si yo la veo, tipo, a veces hace caras y yo digo... Yo también, me dice, quiero saber tu opinión sobre ciertas personas. Y yo le digo, ya sé quiénes son. No, vamos a otro. aprenden. ¿Dónde está su, ¿dónde está su suéter? Sí.
Ay, a mí el otro día tuvimos ahí. Esto lo puedo hacer, ay, no, esto, fíjate, bueno. Ay, es que se me rompió la correa, ay, ando con una estúpida. Sí, no, bueno, ya tiraba la cartilla. Bueno, amigo, entonces estaremos viendo.
Vamos a ver, ¿sabes?
Sí, ya sé, pero bueno, entonces charlamos. Yo ahora le digo a la Lu que estuve en la organización.
No, pero vos mandame y estoy viendo. No pregunto opinión. Es una... que no veo.